Hello. I'm so glad that you're joining us as we continue our study on a biblical perspective of birth order. Birth order is such an important subject. It affects everything we do, our personality, our relationships with others, our relationships in the home, out of the home. It starts, of course, at birth. And birth order, we have to remember, all of these statements and all of these indicators are just that, indicators and not facts. Just like everything else, there's an exception to every rule. Each birth order does have its unique characteristics with both strengths and weaknesses. So how do we define firstborn? And that's what we're going to be looking at today, the firstborn child. Well, they're the oldest, such as Reuben in the Bible, or Cain, the very first child, or sometimes they're just the oldest of the sex, such as Jacob's two wives. Leah was older than Rachel, so she was a definite firstborn, or having more than a 5-year gap of the same sex, which would be after Cain killed Abel, there was a 5-year gap before Seth was born, and then Seth took on all of those firstborn qualities. Or achieving a role reversal, such as what happened with Joseph, the son of Jacob, when he took the firstborn place or dethroned Reuben, who was the eldest. Well, ever since biblical times, the firstborn has been seen as the leader of the family. And as we look at that, let's think about what Jacob said of his firstborn son, Reuben. Genesis 49:3 tells us, Reuben, you are my firstborn. You're my might and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and excellency of power. And so ever since then, the firstborn has been given certain rights, going all the way back to biblical times. In the Bible, they had unique rights and responsibilities and privileges. For the married couple, when the firstborn came along, the child was given priority and prominence in the family and the best of the inheritance with benefits and obligations. You know, we see this today a lot of times. Maybe there's a family business and the firstborn is expected to carry on the family name, to carry on the traditions. If the father happens to be a business owner, many times he can't wait to put that sign up that has his name and son, or and sons, but especially he wants to say and sons. Get that very firstborn name up there. And so the firstborn will often just follow along in their father's footsteps. We see this in the Bible as well with Peter and James. Both of them were the older brothers, and both of them fishermen, just like their father. They did that in the Bible times. It's still going on today. So it's not so unusual for that to happen. And the firstborn also received a double portion of the estate and of the leadership of the father of the family, which meant in Bible times, if the father became incapacitated or was absent from home for any reason, responsibility would fall on the elder son. You know, that really hasn't changed a lot today in many families. Today, the firstborn son, if the father's not there, if through divorce, through death, whatever reason, abandonment or anything, the firstborn son will often, even without being asked, just step up to the plate and take responsibility. The firstborn daughter, if there's younger siblings, and she will often take on more responsibilities herself. It's not unusual today for the firstborn daughter to fulfill a role that in Bible times only belonged to the firstborn son. And so today we might see many of the girls in the family stepping up to the plate, taking on responsibility. And the firstborn son in Bible times, if the father died, he was expected to care for his aging mother or even unmarried siblings, especially the sisters, until they were married. Well, that's pretty much the way it is today. Oftentimes, the eldest child in the family will help take care of the mother, whether it's financially or physically take care of them. And many times, the elder one, the firstborn, is the one that helps the younger siblings out, sending them money, helping them with their education, helping them just through babysitting sometimes while the mom's at work, making sure their homework's done, taking care of things around the home. And so as we look at qualities of the Old Testament and New Testament, seeing how the birth order goes with the firstborn, we see that really hasn't changed all that much. And as we think about the firstborn, one of the firstborns would be Joseph. You might say, no, Reuben was the oldest, not Joseph. Well, remember what I talked about in the beginning, how we define firstborn? Firstborn is either the oldest or if there's a role reversal. You see, Rachel and Leah were really from two different families or households. In Bible times, when Jacob married Leah and Rachel had their little tent here. Jacob and Rachel were over here. So Leah's family was here, Rachel's family was here. And Joseph was the firstborn son of Rachel. And so he had that. And the firstborn children are usually those that are the most adult-oriented. You know, they spend their time with the adults. They have the very closest relationship with their parents. And we certainly see that that was true with the life of Joseph. I mean, after all, Jacob made him that coat of many colors. They're confident, and a lot of times firstborn spend a lot of time dreaming, thinking about the future. They love to plan. And if you know the story about Joseph and his brothers, they even called him the dreamer because that's what he did. Firstborns are usually highly successful. They excel in academics. They're scholarly with a high need to achieve. When Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, we see what happened there. You know, he excelled enough that he learned not just to speak the Hebrew language, but he also learned to speak Egyptian language. And then, remember, he was just a young boy of 17. He developed management skills. He developed skills to learn how to run a household, which meant that he had to excel in all business principles. And he did that on himself, which is like a firstborn. They like to work independently. They like to have a goal and meet it. They're very motivated, and they're energetic. You give a firstborn a job, you can give him another job and another job because they can fulfill that. For many people, being a slave would be a full-time job. But Joseph, without being asked by Potiphar, I'm sure, because Potiphar and Joseph couldn't even communicate in the beginning. Besides, even if they could communicate, Joseph was just a slave. Without being asked, Joseph took on more and more responsibilities and did that. They're logical and enterprising. You know, when Pharaoh had that dream, and Joseph interpreted that there would be a 7-year famine followed by 7 years of plenty. On the spot, very quickly, he was able to come up with a quick plan to survive that famine with all the steps, logical steps needed to take it. And they're taken seriously. I mean, here's a slave speaking to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he did it in such a way that the king believed him. And they're ambitious. Another firstborn who was overly ambitious, Eliab. You might say, what a strange name. Who is he? I never heard of him. Well, Eliab, we don't know a lot about, but we do know he was the older brother, the eldest brother, not just older, but the oldest brother of David. And he did not like it when David was named king rather than him. He thought he should have been. As a matter of fact, they are such dominant leaders that everyone is surprised when they are not chosen to be leaders. They have qualifications of leaders that people just normally expect. You're going to be chosen. And sometimes they're a little bit bossy. Yeah. Because David comes to the battlefield, and Eliab, what's he do? He looks at him and says, and just what did you do with those few measly sheep that you're supposed to be watching? Yeah. Firstborns think they should be in charge all the time, because not only do they have dominant leadership abilities, they have natural leadership abilities. Those that are just inherent within them, like Aaron, the brother of Moses. We often think about Moses as being the leader, but let's go back before the Red Sea. Let's go back just a few months up on the Mount Sinai when Moses says, Lord, just send somebody else to do it. I don't want to be a leader. And God says, that's all right. Your older brother's coming. Aaron's coming. He'll take over for you. And it's because he had natural leadership abilities. And he did not mind helping out his younger brother. That's what older siblings do. They take care of the younger ones. Now, Aaron, because he was a firstborn, he was a perfectionist. Yeah, if you're a firstborn, you know you want rules, you want regulations, you want to be told exactly how to do a job. And not only do you want to follow those rules and regulations, you expect everyone else that you tell those rules and regulations to, because you like to tell rules and regulations, you expect all of them to follow them as well. Can you imagine anyone but a firstborn telling everyone else how many sheep you have to bring, exactly how much flour you have to bring, what day of the week to bring your offering, what time to bring it? How often? Oh, yes, don't forget you have to light the candles so that they're burning at this time, and there has to be evening and morning sacrifices. Oh, they love that. They love following those instructions and helping other people to do it. And they can remember all those rules and regulations. But they have a hard time with the creative part of it. Now, being resourceful enough to carry it out, having a great imagination is one thing, which a lot of firstborns have, but being creative enough to think up a rule and regulation from the very beginning, it's hard to tell what the firstborns would come up with. These were made reasonable. They always want to do things right. They're organized, and they command respect. However, firstborns aren't perfect. They can be taken advantage of, even bullied. But this happens usually only with siblings and with people that they want to please. See, if a firstborn really wants to please you, they'll do things that they would not want to do otherwise, and things that they don't even feel good about doing, but they want to please you. And think about Moses. He's up on the mountain. Nobody knows where he is. Aaron doesn't know where he is, so the people come to Aaron and say, Aaron, help us out. Where's Moses? And Moses is nowhere in sight, so Aaron agrees. We'll build a golden calf and say that this is our God. We don't know where that Moses is. And he felt like he was a failure. Because he had difficulty coping with that stressful situation. People were putting pressure on him. And sometimes firstborns like to create more pressure than they want to have pressure put on them. It's easier for it to go that way. And so what did he do? Yeah, he just followed along with the people. And that's sort of the way it was with Martha. Martha's another firstborn. She didn't like pressure either, and she caved under it with her sister Mary. She has difficulty coping with the stressful day, but she likes taking charge and she wants everything to be just right. Always have everything under control. Martha, that hard-working firstborn who feels responsible for everything. She's reliable. She's a perfectionist. She doesn't like surprises. Yeah, because firstborns like surprises if they can plan them. But they want to be in control, and so they don't like first surprises to come back on them. And Martha was probably used to having Mary's help, or she would not have complained about it. And they criticize themselves too much. If they can't do things perfectly, but criticism doesn't stop with ourselves. It goes on to the other people. And so she criticized Mary in front of Jesus and said, "Jesus, make Mary come and help me." You see, Martha was worrying too much about the order, the process, and the rules. She was so concerned about the meal that she couldn't think about what was happening around her. And, firstborns are very self-oriented. How is this going to affect me? And if this meal is late, how will I look? When people think back about Jesus coming to my house, and even when Jesus thinks about coming back, what's he going to think about? I was so hungry I had to wait 20 minutes extra for lunch. No, that wasn't what anyone was going to be thinking about. But in Martha's mind, that's what she saw. How about the elder brother? The one, that prodigal son and the elder brother? Well, he was a little bit insensitive. The younger brother, the prodigal son, had taken his inheritance. He'd gone off, he'd wasted it, he'd come back poor, in rags, starving. His father runs out to meet him, puts a new robe on him, puts a ring on his finger, and said, "We're going to kill the fatted calf. We're going to have a party." Do you think that made the older brother happy? No. He was very insensitive to both the father who had been missing his son and the younger son's condition at the time. He's selfish with his possessions and with the attention. He said, "Look, he took everything. He took everything that belonged to him. What are you doing putting one of your rings that's supposed to come to me on his finger? What are you doing killing a calf, one of my calves for him? And not only that, how about attention? I've worked all this time and you've never done this for me." No. They have a strong tendency to become angry and then unforgiving. If you're a firstborn and someone hurts your feelings, it's very difficult for you to forgive. And then it even bothers you when God himself forgives someone, because somehow firstborns have a tendency to think we get to decide who's forgiven and who's not. We get to decide how much punishment they get. But that's not the way it works. Samuel, the young boy that Hannah prayed for, that son that she prayed for, he was compliant, cooperative. Just like all firstborns, especially with parents and older people, he's a nurturer and a caregiver. We see that so often. When Samuel, as a young boy, heard God call him in the night saying, "Samuel, Samuel," he immediately goes to Eli and say, "What do you want? What can I do?" And, he is so reliable that Eli says, "When you come back," after he explains that it's God, "you tell me what's happened, and I will believe you." And that's so important to firstborns, that they receive that recognition. They don't want public recognition, but they want to know that you as an individual accept them and that you're giving them the recognition that they deserve. And Eli was still that nurturing caregiver because he knew that what he had to say would hurt Eli. But Eli said, "Go ahead, tell me." And he did. And so as Samuel grew up, he was just driven to take charge. When Eli's sons were killed, Samuel stepped up, and he did it in a way that was pleasing to the Lord. And he was a trailblazer. Now, they're not the ones that will go out and do new things if it goes completely against tradition. But if they're leading, they don't mind going in new paths as long as it doesn't break tradition too much. And Eli's sons died. Eli died. Samuel became the head prophet, the high priest of the day. But not only that, he was a trailblazer, so he became also a prophet. He was a priest and a prophet, the very first one to do that. And they're usually aggressive and self-confident, but sometimes they're people pleasers, and they just feel like they're never going to be good enough. That's the way Samuel was when the people says, "We want a king." Samuel said, "Wait a minute, what have I done? What's wrong with me? Why don't you accept me?" And God had to explain to Samuel that they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And then Samuel, before he announces their king, he says, "Okay, you tell me, what have I ever done wrong? Have I ever stolen anything from you? Have I ever done this? Have I ever done that?" And he wanted to make it clear that he was in the right, because firstborns never want to be in the wrong. They will not admit it, they don't like it, and they'll never say that. Cain is another one. Cain was a firstborn, and he's probably the one that we know the most about because he killed his brother. Well, why did he do that? He did it because God did not accept his offering. He was probably very conscientious, but it says that God did not accept it. He did accept Abel's, who brought the firstborn of his flock. But Abel was not one who took care of the herds. He was one who raised food. He was one who did agriculture. So I could just see Cain. Well, let me see. I'm going to get 6 golden delicious, 6 red delicious, some barley and some wheat. And he probably worked very hard on his offering because it was logical, because it appeared right. Yeah, firstborns want things to be logical and right. But he did not bring what God wanted. But the important thing is he did bring an offering, and in his sight, that was enough. He said, but God did not respect his offerings. And firstborns crave approval. They want approval. It's very, very important. And especially after all the thought and the effort that he put into bringing that offering. And so it says his countenance fell, and God looked at him and says, "Cain, why are you angry?" That is a very big problem with firstborns. They fight anger, and it's something that they have to deal with until the Lord comes in and helps them and calms that anger and helps them through it. And then God says, "Okay, well, tell you what, if you do well, and this will happen," he says, "if you change, this will happen. But if you do not change, it's not going to happen. You'll not be accepted." Well, that brings us to point number 2. The anger is one problem, but the other thing is firstborns just do not like change. They want things to be the way they were. And so what happens? He becomes more and more angry, and it says that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and he killed him. Firstborns have a problem with revenge, rage, and destruction. Think about the little children. They don't get what they want. They're the ones who tear up the paper, throw it across throw it out. They're the ones who in anger hit their fists through the wall, young or old. And they have rage and revenge. And so he killed his brother. But then God says, "Cain, what have you done?" And he says that Where's your brother? He says, I don't know. Am I his keeper? And then he says, what have you done? It is so hard for firstborns to admit they were wrong and that they need to be held accountable. Firstborns need to be brought to the place that they're willing to say, I am wrong. I have made a mistake, and I want to change my life and to take responsibilities for the wrong. You see, when Cain did finally admit that and God gave him the punishment, he did recognize the consequences, and he was willing to take the punishment. If you're the firstborn today, you're one that's easy to spot the faults, and you might feel put down by some of these bad characteristics, but know that there are so many wonderful characteristics. And most of all, you need to understand what Romans 3 says, that we are all sinners, for all have sinned. We don't like to hear that, but it's true. But the good news is Jesus Christ did come. He came that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And Romans 10:9 and 10 says, if you'll confess him with your mouth, if you'll believe in your heart that Jesus is the Son of God, that God raised from the dead, then you too can be saved today. He will help you deal with all of these issues. The anger, the unforgiveness, they're the big two. But he wants you to deal with the little issues as well. And he wants you to be that responsible, loving person that the firstborn can be. He has created you to be a wonderful, wonderful person. And just remember too, all of these are only indicators, they're not rules. So you did not fit in 100% in every category. But take the ones and apply the ones that you can. Change where you can and be the one God created you to be.